Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Modern Business Operation. My name is Sagi. I'm the CEO and founder of Tonkin. And today I have the pleasure of hosting Tania Seary, the president and co-founder of Procurious. Tania, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Well, I heard great things about Procurious. You're an online community and learning platform for procurement and supply chain professionals. But I don't, I don't like to just talk about the tagline and description. I would love to hear, a little bit of your story. Maybe that's kind of where we can start. How you got to start it, but also how you got to procurement and supply chain. It's always interesting. And I know there's other things you're part of, the founder and chairman of the faculty and the source, and maybe tell us a little bit about kind of the origin story.
The origin story. Well, I guess first how I got into procurement. The first 10 years of my career, I was in marketing and I had some very cool, interesting jobs. I worked in London for the Walt Disney Company, their international television department. And, I helped, take a number of companies public and do all their communications. But when I came to do my MBA, I got the opportunity to go to the US and went to Penn State and went to a big school that specialized in operations and logistics. And I fell in love with procurement. So that was the starting point back in Pittsburgh a few years ago, a couple of decades ago. And then the journey has really gone from there. So, and led me eventually to start a number of businesses that specialize in procurement. I'm a bit of a procurement entrepreneur, I think you could call me, because I have started 3 businesses in procurement. But as we know, procurement's changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. So my businesses have continued to change with it.
That's fantastic. It's always incredible kind of how people end up with procurement. Is always, the statement of you never choose to be in procurement, but you're, you find yourself and you fall in love with it.
Yes.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about, Procurious and a little bit of, what is the angle on that, in this case?
Yeah. Well, look, as I said, procurement's changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. Business has changed a lot. And the way we learn has changed a lot. Well, you're probably a bit too young, but, 30 years ago, we'd go to school, we'd sit in a classroom, we'd get these thick textbooks, these big folders, and, we'd work through materials. Whereas, and the basics of your viewers are in operations, the basics of procurement stayed the same for 20 or 30 years. But now things are changing so quickly that we have to adapt a more agile way of learning, and we have to learn from each other. So this is where Procurious is really catering for the next generation of procurement professionals. There's bite-sized learning on the latest topics, and we're learning from each other. So it's very much collaborative learning, community-based learning. So we like to think we've sort of been one step ahead of where the profession's going, and that we can keep everyone one step ahead.
Well, I think there's no better time than now, I feel like, where things are changing. You're absolutely correct. The last 20, 30 years, you can't compare even forget about each decade. Within a decade, there's multiple changes. But it feels like in the last 2 years, it's within every month. So how do you guys, it's just mind blowing. So how do you guys go about that? Or like, what is amazing, stories or examples you've kind of seen?
Yeah. Well, look, the great thing about my job is that I'm talking to procurement leaders around the world all the time. So I'm literally on the road all the time. Next week, I'll be in Abu Dhabi. Then 2 weeks after that, I'm in London. I was in New York a month ago, and now I'm talking to you in California, which is fantastic. And so it gives me the opportunity to really understand the challenges that people are facing and what their learning needs are. And of course, we can't have a conversation today without talking about AI. And, of course, this is probably one of the biggest changes we've seen in the last 2 years. So I guess my job is, how do we equip procurement leaders with, encouraging them to stay up to date with AI and how their skill set is going to have to change over the next, well, right now, people have to be changing right now and adopting and using and testing AI and understanding how it works. So that's probably one of the biggest changes and what we're really working on with our community.
Do you feel like, from you guys, what you're seeing, do you feel like procurement professionals are more open for, so like taking this first step into learning this new world? Because, I've, like you've mentioned, I have a lot of, opportunities to talk to a lot of different industry leaders in a lot of different departments. And it's not, I can tell you, it's not one fit all. Different departments are more curious, and kind of building on your name of curious, right? Like more curious. How do you feel like, what you've seen in the last, year, the procurement professional around kind of jumping on this opportunity?
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, all the research we're doing is saying that most people are still in the early stages of reviewing this. So if you're listening and you haven't started, don't worry, it's not too late. But what a piece of advice one of our, trainers in our program has put forward is that you should give your team as much as sort of a day a week to really start testing these tools and trialing them and coming back to you and saying, hey, here's a use case I think that we could do. And of course, it's not just about the profession, but, we're dealing with all our suppliers, and procurement professionals and operations professionals should have an expectation that their suppliers are coming to them with use cases. So we really have to drive our supply base to adopt AI as well in this current pressure. It's always pressure for procurement to reduce costs. So that's really probably the most interesting part right now is how do you work with your suppliers to partner and actually drive costs down through AI? And how do you capture that value that's delivered and share it between the two parties? So I think the biggest focus right now, probably with companies, is investing in their products and what they offer the market. So I think the first step for procurement and operations professionals is to actually talk more to your suppliers about the value they're going to deliver you through their products. Because I think the back-end functional enhancements will come later, because companies always invest in what they're offering their customers first. Well, they should do to stay competitive. So I think that's important. And we had the co-head of Barclays Bank speak at one of our events. And, he said that this is probably the first time in history with the technological advancement where it's a big capital investment. So, that really means the boards are going to have to be making these decisions about where they invest in AI and how, because, we're talking, significant amounts of cash here. So it's going quickly, but there's also, we need cash, we need to look after our customers. And the big thing is governance, and we're all saying you've got to keep a human in the loop. I think a lot of boards are worried about the governance side of things. But having said that, it's going to move very quickly, and everyone should be, exploring and understanding this new change.
No, I think that's great. I think, where I wanted to kind of go with it next, and you kind of maybe talking about that enterprise side of it. So maybe we can double click into that before going back to sort of like the personal level, right? Because you can think about efficiency and productivity kind of slightly different, where efficiency is the process level and the company level and how much you invest versus sort of the final outcome, versus the productivity is a little bit on a personal level and kind of how productive are you. But if we stay with enterprises for a second, you really, I think, touch an important point, which is procurement kind of play two roles here. They're very similar, like any other department, where they need to look internally of how do we leverage this technology better? Is there an unlock here where we can do a lot, more strategic work, a lot more volume, a lot more high quality without adding more cost? But at the same time, that's part of their job in general for the rest of the company, right? Of how do we
that's right. Make them
right the
more
spend?
efficient. Yes.
Yeah, so maybe you can talk a little bit about, I know part of your guys, services and work you do is, or even you personally, is just helping and advising, those enterprises. So you touched a little bit about it, but, comes, a professional, senior or maybe C level or SVP or VP level comes to you, and ask, what should we do? How should we think about it? What would be your kind of like elevator advice?
PHP, I would say, and I say this with my own team, I've been saying it for a while, we need to unchain ourselves from the desk. Anything that is keeping us at our desk, and, people say rules-based repetitive tasks should be done by AI. So we really need to automate whatever we can that is a repetitive. And, what I've also said for a few years is, the more we adopt AI and technology, actually, the more human we have to become, because we actually need to get unchained from our desks and we need to go out and see our suppliers. We need to see what they're doing. We need to see the inefficiencies. We need to go and, spend time in the plants and the operations. And hopefully a few of your listeners today will be laughing because I hope they've seen their procurement partners a lot. But this is one of the big opportunities and I was delighted you invited me, is for procurement and operations to work more closely together. So if we can automate, the rules-based repetitive tasks and get away from our desk, we can actually sit down together and talk about a lot of the things that are super important. Yesterday I was talking on a webcast about cybersecurity. And one of the biggest problems is everyone's still working in silos on the threats. And, procurement and operations really need to work together on these third-party risks. We need to work together on how our suppliers are bringing these new technologies to us and how we negotiate and embed and partner with them. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think we should embrace getting away from our desk because there's a lot of things that are keeping us chained there. And, we're doing these boring, repetitive tasks and we can get out and actually, drive some outcomes and some values in the knowledge that our day job is being completed.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting part that you started to talk about, right, when which is interesting to me to hear your thoughts too, that the immediate respond, I felt like, with how organizations are looking at suppliers that are using AI, and for a good reason, is what is the privacy and infosec
Yes.
implications, right? And I think that's important. What I'm curious about is how soon, or if at all, do you think supply category managers and procurement professionals are gonna start looking at suppliers and rate them? How we had the impact, environmental impact, and diversity impact, and bunch of other kind of metrics that
modern slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Where you look at where you judge supplier not only by their product and offering, but also the way they operate.
Yes.
I wonder if you think we'll see a soon future where how much a supplier actually leverage AI or efficiency from their side as a measurement of giving extra points, if you will, for a supplier that does that versus not.
Yeah. And I think, this is where technology is going to help us a lot, because when we select a supplier now, there are so many more variables than what there were 30 years ago. These are very complex decisions, and you also have to have a lot of visibility into your supply chain, as we've learned over particularly the last 10 years. So once again, these sourcing decisions that we're making are a lot more complex because there's a lot more for us to think about. So technology can help us with that, but also at the end of the day, being human and having that level of trust with your supplier, because trust is probably still one of the most important things in business. And the last 10 years has shown us that, relationships are really what mattered when, the world was closed down due to COVID, and supply chain problems are resolved through trust and relationships. So, I think we need the technology. It's going to help us a lot. But then we also need the technology to help us keep up with these decisions. I guess the other dynamic that's happening a lot with, the kinds of decisions you're making is the different regions of the world now are really evolving, have very different views on these topics. So that's making it even more interesting for companies because, different parts of the world have different views on ESG. So you might work in a global company and you might have to have a different strategy for each region, which is the new development as well. So it keeps us on our toes.
Exactly. Well, I think that's a great segue to that other part of, interest for everyone talking about this topic, is not only how the efficiency is, as a department or company leader, but on the individual level, right? If you are listening, or if you are mentoring or suggesting, help to an individual for their own career, how do people need to think about AI in your perspective, in your experience, in procurement? Is that scary? Do they need to embrace it? How do they prepare for it for their own personal job?
They need to be curious. That's the thing. You need to learn about all of these things. You don't have to be an AI expert, but you have to, understand how others are using it, what the fundamentals are. It's critical, just like you have to understand what modern slavery is and what net zero is and scope 3 is part of that. So, that's the exciting thing about being in procurement and operations as well, I'm sure, is that, you have to be on top of these things because these roles are at the intersection of all these issues, which makes it, I think, one of the best professions in the world to be in. And, as I said, you don't have to be an expert in all these areas, but you do have to know enough to ask the questions and learn. And I think that's the big benefit of, having a global learning community is you can ask other people in your community. And, some will be ahead of you on some issues, some will be behind. But together, if we all work together, we really build our muscle and our strength as a community and understand these issues.
It's I think I was about to kind of maybe double click into that last 20 years, what made, in your opinion, the best professionalized teams or individuals.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the answer is also the community and being curious, but anything stood out from folks early in their career versus late in their career, companies that were more mature than less mature, because there was so much change in the last even 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. You have all this experience, what kind of stands out? What patterns did you see?
Well, look, what I see is, and people that are drawn into our community, and I think we all need to be lifelong learners. So, there's, in my world, there's sort of two groups of people. I mean, people who think they know everything and they seek the comfort of what they know. And there's those that go, hey, I know a lot of stuff, but I also know there's a lot more to learn. And they're the kind of people that we're working with in our community. So, I think some of the best leaders I have seen have been extremely competent. And I mean, this would be part of my advice to young professionals. I was speaking to an amazing guy. He'll be speaking at our Abu Dhabi roundtable next week. I was speaking to him yesterday, and he's been recognised as a young leader of the year in that region. And he's done a Bachelor of Supply Chain. He's done a Master of Supply Chain. But then he's also getting out and he's learning from his peers and he's staying across the latest thing. So he's not standing still based on his, bachelor and master's degree. He's keep on learning. And I think that's what we've all got to do, is make sure we stay in the flow of business, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind very quickly.
Especially these days.
Exactly. You could get away with it 20 years ago. Nothing had changed much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once a decade something changed. Now it's once a year,
Yeah.
if not more. Yeah.
Well, hey, once a week, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, maybe we can come back here kind of at the end to your career, and I think the amazing sort of like first part of it in marketing, and then the second part of it of an entrepreneur, and in the area of procurement. Um, Entrepreneurship is a very, very hard uh, job for for anyone who've experienced it. Um, how do how do you think back at this decision? What
Yeah.
kind of made you do the jump?
Well, I think for me, I didn't know at the time, but if you are born into a family that has small businesses, you have a high propensity to do this because you think that it's normal. So I think, I joke with people, I come from a long line of unsuccessful business owners. Uh, so I grew up in that sort of environment. But look, I encourage women particularly to stay in large corporates because I really think we're all going to benefit from having more women represented in senior leadership. And the only way we're going to do that is by women staying within corporates. I also think that, corporates are the best place to learn because everyone's coming to you with the ideas and the large corporates train people. So I actually encourage people to stay in large companies because you're right. Being an entrepreneur is very difficult. It's tough. It's definitely tough, but extremely rewarding. And also, I've been able to really, shape my personal and business life to my agenda. So that's the big plus. But I say to most people, stay in large corporates because I'm a lifelong learner. I feel that you learn a lot in large companies. And, when you've got your own business, you're the one who's really having to drive the learning and, you need to get out there and make sure you're on top of things.
Yeah, it's a lot more pave the path versus master it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a great place to kind of have a last question. I always like to ask, when you look back at it in this, and again, congrats on your success so far. Very impressive. Moving through, different industries and and have multiple businesses. What is kind of an advice that sticks with you from early age or early start of your career that you feel like it's worth paying forward?
Yeah. Well, actually, there were two pieces. My father once said to me, I came home and I had straight A's on my report card. And he said, "Is that the best you can do?" And I said, "Dad, it's all A's." He says, "I don't care what it is, as long as it's your best you can do." So, that's
Yeah.
kind of set me up to always be striving for doing the best I can. But then my husband has had a great saying that he gave me probably 20 years ago. And he said, "You are the only common denominator in your career." So, bosses will come and go, but you're always going to be constant because it's quite easy in the start of your career to sort of say, "Oh, I've got a bad boss," or "this happened," or, you can blame everyone else. But at the end of the day, your development is up to you. And I think that's sort of at the heart of why we develop Procurious, is because we're here. People can learn on our platform for free, blogs, webcasts. We do have, a corporate membership as well that has 80 learning events a year, but there's so much you can learn on Procurious just by yourself. So I guess that's my key thing. You're the common denominator in your career, so take accountability and go for it.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. As an individual, as entrepreneur, as a father, it's like this is a perfect statement, and both of them are very aligned too. It's you're the common denominator, but did you do your best? Because you're in control, and have you done your best? So don't blame anyone else if you haven't. I love it. It's perfect.
Thank you.
I thank you so much. If people want to follow up, just nerd about some of those topics, or, trying to connect, are you on LinkedIn? Are you on X? Where can they find you?
Yeah. Oh, and on Procurious. So
Oh, yeah, perfect.
so amazing. And I think, for all your people in operations, if you haven't heard from your procurement business partner for a while, give them a call, catch up face to face,
Yeah,
see what you can do together.
there you go. Very good. Be curious.
Procurious. Yeah, be
Yeah.
curious.
Very good. Tania, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Lovely meeting you.